On June 15, 2012, 18-year-old Olivia Crawford took her last picture on the Bright Angel Trail in the Grand Canyon, Arizona, and then disappeared without a trace. She had planned a short hike, but returned only 2 years later, exhausted, scared, and unable to speak. On July 20, 2014, the girl was found near the town of Tusayan. She was smiling convulsively at the rescuers, showing an empty mouth with not a single tooth left. It became immediately clear that Olivia was the victim of a planned kidnapping, but you will learn in this story who exactly conducted cruel experiments on her for 735 days and why they turned her life into an endless nightmare. Some names and details in this story have been changed for the purpose of anonymity and confidentiality. Not all photos were taken at the scene. The morning of June 15, 2012, in the state of Arizona, began with an atypical atmospheric phenomenon for this time of year. According to official data from a meteorological station near the southern rim of the Grand Canyon, at 7:30 in the morning, the humidity level exceeded the normal level by several times, creating a specific effect of heavy, sticky heat even before the sun rose above the plateau. It was at this time that a car carrying 3 young people pulled into the parking lot at the beginning of the popular Bright Angel Trail. One of them was 18-year-old Olivia Crawford, a resident of Phoenix who had just graduated from high school 2 weeks earlier and was preparing to enter art college. The girl's parents, Eleanor and Richard, later described her during interrogations as the sun around which their lives revolved, emphasizing her energy and passion for art. Olivia was dressed in lightweight sports gear, carrying a professional camera and a small backpack with a supply of water. According to the testimony of her friends, Leo and Chloe, which was reconstructed by the investigation in the first days after the incident, at the beginning of the hike, the girl was in high spirits. The Bright Angel Trail is known for its steep slopes and numerous zigzags that descend thousands of feet into the canyon. For the average tourist, it's a test of endurance, where every step is accompanied by clouds of red dust and the eerie silence of rocky walls. Olivia, according to friends, often stopped to capture the majesty of the scenery, as she planned to create a series of paintings based on this trip. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, the group reached a site near one of the rocky outcroppings, which offered a panoramic view of the canyon's interior ridges. According to Leo's reconstruction of the events, it was here that Olivia complained of sudden fatigue. She told her friends that she wanted to take a few more pictures and get some rest before starting the climb back to the top. Seeing no danger in doing so, the friends decided to hike another 2 miles to the lower viewpoint, agreeing to meet Olivia at the same spot in exactly 1 hour. Olivia stayed near the rocky outcrop, leaning on a large boulder. This was the last time she was seen alive. When Leo and Chloe returned to the rock outcropping at 11 o'clock in the morning, Olivia was not there. At first, they thought she had decided to go out or had already started climbing on her own. However, after searching the area for 50 feet, they noticed an object on the ground that made them stop. Her cap was lying in the middle of the empty trail. No other footprints, camera, or backpack were found nearby. Her friends began to call out to her, but all they could hear in response was the echo of their own voices from the stone walls of the canyon. At 12 o'clock and 15 minutes in the afternoon, Leo and Chloe reached the National Park Service Communications Center and filed an official missing persons report. Within 30 minutes, an emergency search operation was launched. Rangers from the Grand Canyon National Park engaged 2 experienced guides and 1 canine team. The search was complicated by the unbearable heat, which reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit by lunchtime, and the difficulty of the terrain. By the evening, a helicopter equipped with thermal imagers joined the operation, combing every meter of the canyon around the Bright Angel Trail. Over the next 7 days, more than 40 volunteers and professional rescuers descended into the most dangerous crevices, where sunlight barely reached even during the day. They checked every cave and every possible place to fall, but there was no result. Olivia's cap remained the only physical evidence found on the route. The rangers noted in their daily reports that such a disappearance without any additional material trace in an area with a high tourist traffic seemed anomalous. While the search continued in the canyon, quiet despair reigned in the Crawford home in Phoenix. Eleanor and Richard stayed at the rescue headquarters around the clock, hoping to hear at least some news. Their lives had virtually stopped that morning when Olivia did not return home. The girls' room in Phoenix remained untouched. Unfinished sketches, art brushes, and the open book on art history she had read the day before were on the table. Eleanor came in every day without changing the position of a single thing, as if trying to preserve that last moment when their family was happy. This room turned into a kind of museum one day, on June 15, 2012. The official active phase of the search was curtailed due to the lack of any new leads. The sheriff of Coconino County classified the case as a disappearance under unexplained circumstances. In the investigation materials, a note appeared that without the discovery of new facts, further combing of the territory was considered inappropriate. Olivia's parents returned to Phoenix, but from then on, their days consisted only of waiting for a call that could shed light on their daughter's fate. The Grand Canyon, with its millions of years of history and endless labyrinths of rocks, has kept its secret, leaving the family nothing but a lonely hat on a hot trail. Exactly 735 days have passed since 18-year-old Olivia Crawford disappeared without a trace into the depths of the Grand Canyon. For 2 years, the case remained in the archives of the Coconino County Sheriff's Department as one of the most mysterious cold cases in Arizona. However, on July 20, 2014, the veil of silence around this story was torn under circumstances that defied any logical explanation. The morning of that day in the area of the town of Tusayan, which is the southern gateway to the national park, was extremely difficult due to atmospheric pressure. According to meteorological services, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the temperature crossed the 90-degree mark, creating the effect of a red-hot haze over the asphalt of Highway 64. At around 11:30 in the morning, the emergency dispatch service received a call from a hiker who had accidentally strayed from the main route in a wooded area north of the city. The man, whose testimony later became a key element in the reconstruction of the events, said that he came across a figure standing motionless on the edge of a dense forest belt where juniper thickets border an open plateau. According to the eyewitness, he initially mistook what he saw for a visual hallucination caused by heat stroke. The figure looked like a ghost. She was dressed in rags that had once been sportswear, but now resembled gray, faded fabric that barely clung to her emaciated body. The woman moved with unsteady, short steps, as if she was learning to walk again on uneven ground. The patrol crew, led by Officers Miller and Thompson, arrived at the block at 12 o'clock, 10 in the afternoon. The official police report states that they found the woman 200 feet from the side of a forest road. When the officers approached, they did not immediately recognize the person as Olivia Crawford, who disappeared 2 years ago. Before them stood the shadow of her former girlfriend. Her body had been brought to a state of critical dystrophy, where every bone was clearly visible through pale, almost transparent skin that had not seen sunlight for a long time. Deep purple-blue scars were visible on the woman's wrists and ankles. These scars had a characteristic ring shape, indicating that she had been held in metal restraints for a long time. Investigators would later note that the scars were layered on top of each other, indicating that the skin under the shackles had been repeatedly torn and healed in a complete lack of hygiene. What struck the officers the most was the condition of her skin. It was unnaturally white for an Arizona resident who had allegedly spent 2 years in the desert. It was the shade of a person who had been kept in complete isolation from ultraviolet light. The woman did not respond to any sound stimuli. Her gaze was directed into the void, and her pupils hardly constricted in direct sunlight. According to Officer Thompson, when he tried to gently touch her shoulder to guide her to the car, She made a faint sound like air whistling through her damaged lungs, but did not say a word. When they finally managed to put her in the back seat of the patrol car, the situation became even more terrifying. In order to identify the person and check her state of consciousness, Officer Miller used a powerful tactical flashlight. As soon as the beam of light was directed at her face, Olivia sharply flinched, as if from a physical blow. She didn't close her eyes, but rather opened them wide and began to smile nervously, convulsively. It was an unnatural reaction that resembled a muscle cramp or a reflex practiced to the point of automaticity. In the light of the flashlight, the police officers saw a horrifying scene that, according to the officers, caused icy, dead silence in the car. As Olivia stretched her lips in this strange smile, it became clear that she was missing a single tooth. In their place were only inflamed, mutilated gums, covered with numerous small scars and traces of rough surgery. It looked as if each tooth had been extracted with extreme brutality, leaving behind torn edges of the mucous membrane that had not healed properly. The officers recalled that the sight caused them to feel deep physical nausea. The girl continued to smile, showing her empty, disfigured mouth, while her eyes remained filled with boundless, primal horror. According to the paramedics who arrived at the scene at 12:45, the patient's condition was assessed as critical. Olivia was in a state of deep catatonia. She did not resist being transferred to a stretcher, but her body remained clamped in the same position in which she was found. One of the doctors noticed that the woman had a peculiar odor, a mixture of dampness, cheap disinfectants, and old infection. While being transported to the nearest hospital, she continued to stare silently at the ceiling of the ambulance, repeating the same convulsive smile from time to time whenever the glare of the sun or the headlights of oncoming cars flew past the windows. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, news of the discovery of the woman, who by all accounts was Olivia Crawford, reached the sheriff's office. Investigators working on the case in 2012 were shocked. No one expected to find the girl alive after such a long time, let alone in such a state. The fact that she was found only 10 miles from the place of disappearance but looked like a person who had been through hell raised more questions than it answered. It was obvious that Olivia hadn't been wandering the canyon for 2 years. She was being held somewhere, and what was done to her in that unknown darkness left marks that no amount of treatment could erase. She came back from the shadows, but the real Olivia seemed to remain somewhere out there, behind the closed doors of her invisible prison. At 14 hours and 30 minutes on July 20, 2014, an ambulance, accompanied by 2 traffic police crews, arrived at the emergency room of the Sedona Medical Center. On the personal order of the county sheriff, a special security protocol was implemented on the entire floor where the girl was placed. A round-the-clock security post was set up at the door of room 412, and only 3 trusted doctors and 2 nurses with years of experience in crisis situations were allowed to see the patient. The hospital administration tried to create conditions of complete isolation, but the very atmosphere of sterility, which was supposed to symbolize salvation, became a source of new, uncontrollable horror for the victim. The initial clinical examination of Olivia Crawford, the results of which later formed the basis of the indictment, revealed a condition bordering on complete biological exhaustion. The doctors noted total dehydration and a critical level of vitamin deficiency, typical of concentration camp inmates. The girl's weight was 45% below the medical norm for her age. An X-ray examination of her entire body showed old cracks in 4 ribs and both bones of her forearm, which had fused incorrectly without any medical attention. This indicated that the girl had been repeatedly subjected to brutal physical violence for 2 years. However, the true scale of the atrocity was revealed only during a detailed surgical examination of the oral cavity conducted by the chief physician of the maxillofacial surgery department. According to the official expert opinion, the version of natural tooth loss due to illness was rejected in the first minutes. The analysis of the mangled gums and jawbone tissue confirmed the detectives' worst guesses. The teeth had been removed mechanically, using crude tools, probably ordinary pliers or old-style medical extractors. The surgeon noted in the report that the procedures were carried out systematically, at intervals of several weeks, indicating the sadistic methodology of the kidnapper. Numerous chips and deep furrows were found on the periosteum, traces of the instrument slipping during the victim's resistance. The condition of the scar tissue indicated that the extraction had been performed without any anesthesia. Each of the 32 teeth was pulled out by force, while Olivia was fully conscious, feeling every nerve ending being severed. Olivia's behavior in the hospital was extremely disturbing and required constant psychiatric supervision. She categorically refused to eat any solid food, even if it was mashed vegetables. Every time the nurse tried to bring a spoon to her face, the girl fell into a state of catatonic numbness. She agreed to take only a nutritious liquid mixture through a straw, and she never opened her lips completely, as if trying to hide her mutilated mouth even from those who tried to help her. According to the staff, Olivia's greatest fear was any metal objects. The occasional ringing of a medical tray or the sight of sterile instruments on the table made her instantly shudder, crawl into the corner of the bed, and cover her head with her hands, making a thin, monotonous whistle. The investigators' special attention was drawn to the girl's reaction to people in white coats. As soon as the doctor entered the room, Olivia would open her mouth wide in the same convulsive smile that the officers had noticed when they found her. It was not a sign of emotion, but rather a protective reflex developed under the influence of prolonged terror. She remained in this position for several minutes without blinking or responding to the officers. During the first 96 hours in the hospital, she hardly spoke. However, at 3 o'clock in the morning on the 5th day of her stay, the nurse on duty recorded the first attempt at verbal contact. According to the employee's testimony, Olivia was awake and looking out the window at the red rocks of Sedona, which were visible in the moonlight. When the nurse came over to check her IV, she suddenly grabbed her arm, her grip unexpectedly tight. She began to whisper a phrase that made the staff shudder with inexplicable disgust. He said it would be better for the roots. If you remove the stones, the flowers will start growing inside, and then I will be clean. When asked who exactly she was talking about, Olivia only clenched her jaws tighter and fell back into a silent trance. These words, recorded in the observation log, became the first real clue pointing to the psychological profile of the perpetrator, a person who had medical knowledge but used it to implement his own crazy ideas about purification. The Arizona State Police, under the leadership of Detective Vance, officially gave the case the highest priority. Case number 2212 was no longer considered a missing persons case. It was now an investigation into a series of particularly serious crimes: abduction, illegal detention, and systematic torture with the use of special equipment. The detectives realized that somewhere in the wooded area around the canyon, among the dense thickets of conifers and abandoned hunting lodges, a man who had already been dubbed the Monster Dentist by the press was hiding. The investigative team has launched a total review of all medical licenses issued in the state over the past 10 years, looking for doctors who have had run-ins with the law or been disbarred for mental illness. The sterile ward in Sedona became the epicenter of the investigation, where Olivia's every move, her every tantrum, and her every whisper was analyzed as a clue. The realization that the kidnapper could have been observing the search operations for years without being detected created an atmosphere of paranoia among the locals. Olivia had returned to civilization, but her disfigured face was a silent reminder that the real horror still remained somewhere out there, beyond the sterile walls of the hospital, in the shadow of old pine trees, where time was measured only by pain. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, like and comment on this video. Your activity helps YouTube's algorithms promote this content so that Olivia's story can be seen by many more people. This is extremely important for channel growth. Now, let's get down to the investigation. On July 24, 2014, when the news of Olivia Crawford's condition leaked to the media, the sheriff's investigation team was under tremendous pressure. The realization that the girl had been tortured for 2 years, very close to the place of her disappearance, forced the detectives to act aggressively. The main vector of the investigation was again the people who last saw Olivia on the Bright Angel Trail, her friends Leo and Chloe. The police assumed that the young people could have concealed the true circumstances of the events of June 15, 2012, or even acted as accomplices of the kidnapper. For 48 hours, grueling interrogations lasted for many hours at the Flagstaff police station. Leo and Chloe were kept in different rooms, unable to coordinate their testimony. According to the protocols that were later included in the case file, Leo's behavior aroused serious suspicions among investigators. He appeared extremely nervous, constantly wiped sweat from his forehead, and was confused about the chronology of that fateful morning. When Detective Vance demanded to know the exact time when they parted ways at the rocky outcropping, Leo would say either 9 o'clock 30 minutes or 10 o'clock 15 minutes. This discrepancy of 45 minutes looked to professional investigators like an attempt to hide a conflict or an unforeseen event that occurred on the trail. However, the detectives were even more concerned about Chloe's reaction. The reports noted that the girl was unnaturally calm, answering questions dryly and concisely, as if she had prepared each phrase in advance. The culmination of the interrogation was when the investigator put Olivia's recent hospital photo in front of her, the one where she was smiling convulsively with an empty mouth. The police were expecting an emotional outburst, horror, or at least tears from their close friend. But Chloe only held her gaze on the photo for a moment. Her face remained motionless, and not a single shadow of sympathy flashed in her eyes. This cold restraint and complete lack of empathy led detectives to theorize that Chloe could have deliberately lured her friend into a trap. The investigation began to work out the version of Olivia's transfer to a third party. Detectives assumed that Leo and Chloe could have been in debt or part of a criminal scheme, handing the girl over to the kidnapper in exchange for a monetary reward. It was speculated that she may have been held in one of the many abandoned quarries near the town of Williams, which is located 30 miles from the canyon. The area is known for its underground workings and abandoned technical structures, ideal for hiding a victim. The public, picking up on the leaks, began a real harassment of the young people on social media, branding them as monster friends. However, a thorough investigation, which lasted 3 weeks, began to destroy this version. An analysis of Leo and Chloe's phone calls, emails, and bank accounts over the past 2 years yielded no results. Cybercrime specialists did not find any suspicious transfers or contacts with people who could be involved in the kidnapping. The geolocation of their phones on the day they disappeared also matched the official version of their movements in the canyon. Detective Vance was forced to admit that Leo's confusion in his testimony was the result of post-traumatic stress, and that Chloe's coldness was her personal psychological reaction to the shock. The police were stumped. Realizing that the friendly trail was false, the investigation team returned to the very origins of the case, to the video surveillance archives for June 2012. The detectives decided to expand the radius of the search to 50 miles from the point of disappearance. After 4 days of continuously reviewing grainy footage from traffic police cameras and private gas stations, the forensic team noticed a detail that had been overlooked during the first investigation. A camera mounted near an intersection 20 miles north of the Bright Angel Trail captured a dark van-like vehicle. The vehicle appeared in the frame at 10 o'clock 45 minutes in the morning, just as Olivia was alone on the rocky outcropping. The van had fully tinted windows, including the front side window, which was a violation of state law. Moreover, the vehicle was traveling at a high rate of speed toward isolated private property on the northern edge of the Kaibab Forest. The footage showed that the van had some artisanal modifications to its body, and that one handle was missing from the rear door. This discovery became a point of no return in the investigation. The appearance of an anonymous dark vehicle in the immediate vicinity of the crime scene instantly redirected all police resources in a completely different direction. The investigation focused on the owners of remote farms and private plots in the north, where the land was divided into huge plots, often hidden from view by dense coniferous forests. The detectives were faced with a critical task: to identify the brand, year of manufacture, and most importantly, the owner of the van as soon as possible. Every hour counted, because the person behind the wheel of that dark vehicle was the key to the mystery of what exactly had been happening to Olivia over the past 2 years in the darkness of her invisible imprisonment. In early August of 2014, Olivia Crawford's rehabilitation process at the Sedona Medical Center entered a new, much more complex phase that required the involvement of highly specialized crisis psychology specialists. As the girl's physical condition stabilized somewhat thanks to intensive care and parenteral nutrition, Dr. Elias Aris, a leading clinical expert with experience working with victims of prolonged detention and torture, was brought in. His daily reports, copies of which were handed over to the investigation team at exactly 17 o'clock, became the main source of information about what exactly happened behind the closed doors of the unknown basement. Olivia struggled to communicate. Due to the complete absence of teeth, her diction was critically impaired, and her voice often broke into a weak, hoarse whisper that was difficult to identify, even with the help of sensitive sound recording equipment. Olivia's testimony, recorded by Dr. Aris in the first weeks of August, lacked any logical chronology. She often confused days with months, describing her 2-year detention as an endless stay in a white room where the sun never sets. However, specific sensory details constantly emerged in her stories that helped investigators reconstruct her living conditions. She recalled the persistent smell of latex, the pungent aroma of cheap disinfectants, and the constant monotonous sound of a working compressor that seemed to suck in her fear. Every time the conversation touched on the kidnapper's face, Olivia fell into a state of stupor. She could not describe his facial features, claiming that he always appeared in front of her, wearing a medical mask and large goggles that reflected the bright light of the lamps, making his gaze completely invisible. The most frightening aspect of her stay in the hospital was a specific physiological reaction to the lighting that the medical staff recorded during a routine evening round on August 5th. When a nurse accidentally turned on a high-powered examination lamp above the patient's bed, Olivia did not cover her arms, scream, or try to turn away. Instead, she did something that made the experienced nurse shudder with horror. She opened her mangled mouth wide to the limit of physiological possibility and froze in that position for several minutes, closing her eyes tightly. Her breathing became shallow, and her body turned into a motionless, numb statue. It looked like an automatic reaction, developed to the level of an unconditional reflex, to the beginning of another painful manipulation. In his analytical report, Dr. Aris noted that this manifestation is a classic example of traumatic conditioning using the method of negative reinforcement. Detective Vance, having analyzed the data, came to an unequivocal conclusion. The kidnapper did not just hold the girl captive, he created a full-fledged semblance of an improvised dental office in the basement. For Olivia, each flash of light meant the beginning of the next stage of treatment that she constantly mentioned in her delusions. Investigators began actively looking for someone who might have had access to dental equipment that had been decommissioned, purchased through private ads, or stolen from medical equipment warehouses. It became clear that they were not looking for a random psychopath, but a person with specific technical skills and fanatical, maniacal devotion to their crazy idea. Meanwhile, the pressure on the investigative team from the media has reached a critical point. Dozens of journalists gathered daily outside the sheriff's office in Flagstaff, demanding answers from the police as to how such a criminal could have gone undetected for 2 years, operating virtually under the noses of national park rangers. Detective Vance was working 18 hours a day, personally checking every new lead that came into the hotline. The tension in the headquarters grew even more when, on August 10th, an unexpected incident occurred during a regular session with a psychologist, giving the investigation a new direction. To stimulate her memory, Olivia was shown a series of photographs of the surrounding Arizona countryside. When a bird's-eye view of the northern part of Kaibab National Forest appeared on the computer monitor, the girl's condition instantly deteriorated. She began to gasp for air, her face covered with large drops of cold sweat, and her hands began to randomly scratch the blanket, trying to find support. Olivia couldn't take her eyes off the site, where dense pine forests bordered deep ravines and old logging roads. In keeping with official protocol, she repeated the word roots several times, pointing to the wooded area at the very edge of the national park. This was a direct, albeit indirect, confirmation that she was being held in this particular area, which was virtually inaccessible to regular patrols due to the difficult terrain and lack of tourist routes. At that time, specialists from the technical department were continuously working on identifying the dark van seen in the archives of video recordings from 2012. Using modern digital image filtering techniques, they finally managed to determine that the vehicle had a characteristic deep dent on the left rear fender and chrome wheels with a specific pattern that was atypical for this model. Forensics analyzed hundreds of hours of surveillance footage from gas stations along Highway 64, trying to track every stop of the vehicle in the days leading up to the girl's discovery. Detective Vance realized that they were getting closer to the truth with every tracked movement of that vehicle. Each frame, each recorded appearance of a dark silhouette on the road narrowed the search to several square miles of dense forest. The person driving the van was already very close, hiding in the shade of old conifers and behind the high fences of private properties that had never been scrutinized. All the investigation's attention was now focused on finding the point where this anonymous object would turn into a real person with a specific name, address, and a history of his own madness. On August 12, 2014, the investigation into the disappearance of Olivia Crawford finally broke through the deadlock. The breakthrough occurred at a small, privately owned gas station located at the intersection of Highway 64 and an old logging road 15 miles north of Tucson. The station owner, Samuel Hall, contacted the sheriff's office after seeing a report on the evening news about a dark van with distinctive modifications. Hall's testimony, recorded in the protocol at 9 o'clock in the evening, became the key element that was missing from the forensic team. The man said that over the past 2 years, he had been regularly visited by a customer in a dark blue van with a deep dent in the left rear fender and atypical chrome wheels. Hall remembered him because of a strange habit. The customer always bought large quantities of bottled water, rubbing alcohol, and rolls of paper towels, while never engaging in conversation or taking off his sunglasses, even at dusk. Thanks to this clue, the forensic team obtained a warrant to seize the gas station's video surveillance servers for the last 3 months. One of the recordings from July 7th clearly captured the driver's face as he briefly lowered the window to pay in cash. The facial recognition program produced the result instantly. 29-year-old Aaron Wexley was in front of the investigators. A further check of state databases revealed the suspect's place of residence. It turned out that Aaron Wexley owned a small wooden house on the northern edge of the Kaibab Forest, which once belonged to his late grandfather, who worked as a forester in the 50s. This 15-acre site was surrounded by dense manzanita bushes and century-old pines, making it virtually invisible to tourist groups and air patrols. Officially, Wexley did not have a full-time job, but he received regular payments from his family's trust fund. His neighbors, whose properties were 5 miles away, described him as a ghost who could go weeks without appearing in public, and he fenced off the area around his home with barbed wire and private property warning signs. A study of Wexley's biography revealed a chilling psychological profile to Detective Vance. Aaron was an excellent student at school, showing special aptitude for biology and anatomy. However, in his third year of medical school at the University of Arizona, his life took a turn for the worse. According to archival records from the dean's office, Wexley was expelled for inappropriate behavior during practical training in the morgue and a maniacal idea of a fix for tissue regeneration by removing excess biological stimuli. He publicly stated to his professors that he considered modern medicine to be too soft and that he was an unrecognized genius, capable of bringing a person to a new level of purity of the body. It was this moment that became the point of no return, after which Aaron finally isolated himself from society in the forest wilderness. The detectives, analyzing the data collected, began to understand the horrific logic of Olivia Crawford's captivity. The girl was not an object of sexual pleasure or a ransom victim for Wexley. She was a project for him. Every detail of her life in the basement was subordinated to his morbid schedule, which he called in his notes a purification protocol. The investigation suggested that the constant white noise Olivia mentioned during her sessions with the psychologist was the sound of a powerful exhaust system or dental compressor that worked around the clock to hide her possible screams and ensure the sterility of his makeshift operating room. According to the psychologist Elias Aris, who continued to work with Olivia, it was found that Wexley kept a detailed diary of observations of her gums after each procedure. Olivia recalled that he made her listen to lectures on anatomy, which he himself read while he performed the manipulations. Her whole world shrank to a small sterile spot under the operating lamp. Any attempt to deviate from his treatment plan was punishable by deprivation of water for 24 hours or by turning on an ultrasonic emitter that caused an unbearable headache. Detective Vance realized that Wexley had created a perfect closed ecosystem of terror where Olivia was just biological material in the hands of a man who had lost all connection with reality. By the evening of August 14th, the state police had prepared an operation plan. A reinforced SWAT team was redeployed to a secret base near Williams, awaiting final confirmation that Wexley was inside his home. The atmosphere at the headquarters was tense, broken only by the hiss of the radios. The detectives realized that every square foot of the area around the forester's house could be mined or equipped with traps set by a man who had been preparing for years to protect his clinic. Case number 2212 was nearing its climax. Aaron Wexley's name was officially on the state's most dangerous offenders list, and his picture now hung on every bulletin board in the Grand Canyon area. While Olivia in the hospital flinched at every sound in the corridor 50 miles away in the thick darkness of the Kaibab forest, police snipers took up positions, holding the door of an old wooden house where time had stopped at pain in their sights. At 5:30 in the morning on August 15th, 2014, Special Forces, supported by federal agents, began to storm Aaron Wexley's home. The operation unfolded in the dense pre-dawn fog that enveloped the northern edge of the Kaibab forest. When the armored vehicle smashed through the massive gate, a makeshift alarm went off outside the perimeter fence, filling the forest with a piercing, high-pitched sound. Wexley, who was in the main building, according to thermal imagery, did not offer armed resistance inside. Instead, he used a pre-prepared hole in the floor of the veranda and disappeared into the thicket using a network of branching forest paths that he knew intimately. The pursuit lasted more than 2 hours. Wexley tried to break away from the capture team by heading toward one of the most isolated lookouts on the northern rim of the Grand Canyon. He was detained at 7:45 in the morning at the very edge of the cliff, where the height of the cliff reached 2,000 feet. According to the testimony of Officer Stevens, who was the first to handcuff the suspect, Wexley appeared completely calm, almost aloof. He did not show aggression, only looked at the detectives with contempt and said a phrase that was later quoted by all the leading publications in the country. "You do not realize what you have done. You have just interrupted the most important stage of the research I have been working on for years." While Wexley was being transported to a detention center, forensic experts began searching his home. What they found under the floor of the living area made even experienced FBI agents shudder in disgust. The basement of the house had been transformed into a full-fledged sealed chamber, which Wexley himself called the Clinic of the Future in his notes. The walls were covered with soundproof panels, and in the center of the room stood an old dental chair modified with additional fixtures to secure the head and limbs. A powerful shadowless lamp hung above the chair, and tools were laid out on a metal table nearby. Surgical forceps, scalpels, and a drill connected to an autonomous generator. The air was filled with a persistent sweet smell of blood that had been ingrained in the concrete floor for 2 years. A reconstruction of the events of 2012, based on Wexley's diaries and Olivia's first testimony, revealed the horrifying truth about the day she disappeared. On June 15th, Aaron was tracking a group of hikers in the woods near Bright Angel Trail. When Olivia was alone for a moment, he attacked her from behind. The kidnapping was lightning fast. Wexley used a ketamine-based sedative that he injected directly into the girl's neck. He carried the unconscious Olivia to his van, which was parked on a maintenance road 200 feet from the route, and within 40 minutes, she was locked in his basement. For 735 days, Aaron Wexley led a double life. During the day, he could appear in Tucson or Williams, buying groceries and supplies, creating the image of a withdrawn but harmless loner. However, every evening he would return to his clinic. In the confiscated observation log, which ran to more than 300 pages, Wexley described each session in detail. He pulled Olivia's teeth one by one, keeping a 3 to 4 week interval so that the gums would have time to heal a bit before the next intervention. His crazy logic was based on the idea of biological cleansing. He believed that teeth are imperfect natural structures that accumulate toxins and prevent people from reaching a higher state of consciousness. By removing them, he was supposedly freeing Olivia from her animal nature. A separate section of the diary was devoted to what Wexley called the aesthetics of gratitude. It became known that he had developed a system of brutal psychological training. After each tooth extraction procedure, Olivia was required to look him in the eye and smile broadly. If she refused to do so or showed signs of pain, he deprived her of drinking water for the next 48 hours. That is why the nervous, convulsive smile that the officers saw when they found her became an automatic reaction to fear and the presence of people. For the girl, the smile was no longer an expression of emotion. It became the price for a sip of water and survival. Forensic experts also found a collection of trophies. In glass jars with formalin, Wexley kept all 32 of Olivia's teeth, each carefully labeled with the date of extraction and a description of the girl's reaction. He considered himself not a torturer, but a creator who turned the young artist's life into an endless, cyclical session of surgical horror. An audio system was also discovered in the basement, broadcasting white noise recordings around the clock to drown out any sounds that might penetrate the surface. Olivia lived in this sterile hell, losing her sense of reality, while Wexley methodically realized his dream of a man without roots every night. The documentary evidence collected in Aaron Wexley's home has become one of the most extensive evidence bases in Arizona's criminal history. Detective Vance, flipping through the criminal's diary, noted in the report that the real danger was not Wexley's physical strength, but his cold medical approach to suffering. He didn't just kidnap the girl, he tried to rewrite her physiology, leaving scars on her body and mind that would not heal even after decades. Every instrument in his office was a mute witness to how science in the hands of a madman becomes an instrument of primitive cruelty. On November 14, 2014, the final hearing in the case that forever changed security protocols in U.S. national parks was held at the Coconino County Superior Court in Arizona. The trial of Aaron Wexley lasted several weeks and was accompanied by unprecedented security measures. The courtroom was filled with an atmosphere of heavy, almost physically tangible tension. Wexley sat motionless in the dock as if he were carved in stone. Throughout the presentation of the evidence from diaries describing torture to glass jars containing the victim's teeth, he did not take his eyes off the wall in front of him. Not a single shadow of pity or fear flashed across his face. According to the bailiffs, he looked not like a criminal awaiting sentencing, but like a scientist whose lecture was unreasonably interrupted at the most interesting point. When the prosecution was given the floor, the prosecutor showed the court photographs of Olivia Crawford taken on the day of her abduction in 2012 and compared them to the footage from the hospital in Sedona. The difference was so stark that some of the jurors turned away, unable to look at the screen. Wexley, on the other hand, carefully studied the images of his work, tilting his head slightly to the side. In his closing remarks, he only briefly stated that an uneducated society will never understand the concept of purity that he was trying to give this girl. His cold, emotionless voice made many in the audience shudder. The judge announced the verdict at 17 hours and 15 minutes. Aaron Wexley was found guilty on all charges: kidnapping, unlawful detention, infliction of grievous bodily harm, and torture. The sentence was final: life imprisonment in a maximum security prison without the possibility of early release. When they handcuffed him again, he only briefly looked at his lawyers and silently left the room. For justice, the case was over, but for the Crawford family, it was only the beginning of a long and painful journey into a new reality where their former life was destroyed forever. Olivia returned to her home in Phoenix at the end of 2014. Her room, which had remained untouched for 2 years as a one-day museum, now became her refuge and her prison. However, her life never resembled the life of the energetic artist she had been before that fateful Bright Angel Trail hike. 20-year-old Olivia categorically refused any options for prosthetics or implants. Even detailed consultations with the best dentists in the country could not overcome her panic fear of any foreign objects in her mouth. The sight of dental instruments or just the sound of a metal click caused her to suffocate and have uncontrollable tremors in her limbs. Olivia's daily routine now took place in a room with constantly dimmed lights. Eleanor and Richard were forced to drape the windows with thick curtains because the bright sunlight, the same Arizona desert light she once loved to paint, now triggered a terrifying automatic reaction in her. The parents watched in pain as their daughter flinched at every random doorbell or the sound of a car engine passing by the house. She could sit in a chair for hours, staring into a dark corner of the room, and her face would sometimes spontaneously stretch into the same nervous, hollow smile, a reflex that Aaron Wexley had built into her nervous system through pain and thirst. According to the psychologists who continued to visit Olivia at home, she was only physically free. Psychologically, she was still chained to that white chair in the basement under the kaibab forest. Time for her stopped flowing linearly. It was measured by flashes of past pain and the monotonous white noise she could still hear in the silence of the house at night. Olivia stopped painting, claiming that the colors seemed too bright and the brushes reminded her of instruments from the clinic. Her days were spent in quiet, almost sterile isolation, where the only sign of her presence was a faint sigh or a soft whisper about roots that sometimes came from her bedroom. The case, officially coded as 2012 OC, was closed and transferred to the archives of the Coconino County Sheriff's Office. The police had done their job, and the perpetrator received the punishment provided by law. However, the echo of this crime will forever remain in the silence of the Grand Canyon, where small personal belongings of tourists are still sometimes found on the Bright Angel Trail, reminding us of the fragility of human security. The story of Olivia Crawford has become a dark legend in Arizona, the story of a girl who followed the landscape and returned with emptiness instead of a voice. She became the price civilization paid for meeting the purest form of madness that hid under the roots of old pines, where the sun never penetrates the tinted windows of a dark van. Justice was served, but it could not return Olivia's smile, the real smile that remained forever on that June morning in 2012.